Hello and welcome back to El Partido, yet another Spanish football podcast. But as always, with a little nostalgic twist. We've got a great episode lined up for you tonight, all about El Cholo and Diego Simeone. So we're excited to get into that. But first of all, I've got to welcome back Paul McGarrihy. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Nick. I'm doing well. I'm obviously gutted that I couldn't be a part of the last episode, but because of how great it was and how great the guest was. But I'm happy to be back. I know that people might be thinking, it's a bit sporadic now. I've had a few episodes off, but that's just the way that the things have fallen. It's not anything to worry about. Obviously, I am gutted though. But if I'm going to be substituted for an episode, then Matt Harrison is absolutely the person who I think is more than capable of. I just have to worry that he might be so good that he takes my place permanently. Really, I know he doesn't wear a cape, but he's helped us out in the last few episodes, as people might welcome the fact that I've just been away a fair while, so I'm back now though. I'm back and I'm glad to be.
It kind of sounds like you're bragging that you've got such a busy, active social life, Paul, and you're trying to make me jealous because I quite clearly don't, because I keep turning up week in, week out for these.
No, you're the glue.
I've got nothing else to do.
You're the glue that holds everything together, Nick. Yeah, that's what it is.
It is. And then, but like I say, the episode with Guillem was so fantastic. So if you haven't listened to it yet, go back and listen to it. Like I say, it was a pinch myself moment, as Matt pointed out. I've recorded nearly 500 podcasts with Matt, so I should be used to it by now. But Guillem was a good little side part of it too. But enough about him, because we've got an even more exciting guest on this week. We are joined by Emmanuel from the Partido podcast. It's an Atletico Madrid podcast. And this evening, as I've already said, we're going to talk about Diego Simeone and just have a bit of a loving and a celebration about the man. So, Emmanuel, welcome to El Partido.
Well, Nick and Paul, it's a pleasure for me to be here, and also it's also a pleasure to talk about Cholo, because as an Atleti fan, I would say I kind of started supporting the club in like the beginning of the glory years of the club. That's under Quique Sanchez Flores, and to talk about Cholo is actually amazing because of what he represents for the club and also what he has made fans like us dream to maybe achieve with the club as well.
It is, and he's such a important character to the history of Atleti, and what he's done in basically turning a 2-horse race into pretty much a 3-horse race every season. Now he's nothing short of phenomenal given the circumstances that we see in La Liga, Paul. He's such a character, and he's so passionate, and he's got those black suits. He's just, is he perfect? Is he just great?
I think he's a really cool guy. I have a lot of time for him. I think as well, I'm not sure. Well, I don't know how I would feel if he was the manager of my team. I don't know if I'd have a slightly different opinion in the sense that, sometimes he can maybe be a little bit frustrating, but as a part of the theatre that comes with La Liga, I think he's somebody who only makes it a more enjoyable league to watch, and the colourful scenes that he causes on the sidelines, be it whether Atleti are winning or whether they're a goal behind or not. He's always somebody who on the touchline you can't really take your eyes away from, can you? I think he's an exceptional manager, and I have a lot of time for him. I think he's good for a soundbite as well,
Absolutely is. He's box office to me, because we don't have too many characters in football anymore, and he is exactly that. He is a character. Everyone's becoming sort of like pet robots, and I don't like it. So I'm going to celebrate Diego Simeone a little bit more. Maybe just before we get into his managerial career, which I'm sure this will really focus on, I just want to talk about his playing career, because he's got one of the most fascinating sort of like routes into football, especially into European football. Emmanuel, I don't know if you look a little bit younger than me, to be fair, so I'm not too sure if we'll be able to get this, but I'm sure you know your stuff. Do you know which European club he played for first? I was quite unsighted by this when I learned about it.
Yeah, I think that's AC Pisa in the 90s, in 1990, I believe.
It is,
Where
and it's not really a path well trodden by Argentine players into Europe, is it? Pisa doesn't feel like the first stop, but it's quite interesting, especially considering they got promoted back to Serie A this season. It's kind of like they're both at the top of the game once again, and it was quite an interesting move for him as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And I think there was a series, I think, by Copa 90 about Boca Junior and River Plate, and they kind of mentioned like the connection Italy kind of has to Argentina. And if you basically go back historically, you kind of see that there is like a link between Buenos Aires and maybe, for example, Naples. But that's maybe thanks to Diego Maradona. But it's not really of a surprise for an Argentine coming to Europe and, let's say, going to Italy. And I know Spain is the obvious destination, but it's not that much different. But like you said, it was maybe like a surprise because, when you talk of many other Argentinian players who have like come to Europe, majority of the time you mostly have Spain. So, and even if it's not Spain, if it's to Italy, you have like the bigger clubs in Italy or the more renowned clubs. But now Cholo went to AC Pisa, and that's after having like, I think that's breaking through. I think that's CZ Veles, where he did well, and I think that's also where he picked up the nickname El Cholo, because there was another Simeone there, and then his playing style kind of like resembled the guy. So the fans kind of said, okay, since he's a hard worker, he gives everything. I think if you want to describe Cholo, it'd be like, if he plays for your team, he can die for you or defend you. But if he does not play against you, he basically maybe kills you or gives you a very, very hard time on the pitch.
Yeah, I can definitely see that in his mannerisms even today, Paul. And we famously saw it back in the 90s. I'm not an England fan, but I know England fans listen to this podcast, and his inferences in the 1998 World Cup. Well, less said about that, the better. But like I say, he had quite an interesting pathway to eventually what he would call his home in Madrid, and I think he will call it his home. I know he had stints back in Argentina later on in his career, but he kind of just boomerangs around the Metropolitano at this point. He goes to Sevilla first. That's his first taste of football in Spain. Links up with Diego Maradona for that one season as well, which I think is just absolutely fascinating as a pairing, that you can say that they were both on the pitch at the same time. But that's quite decent experience for him, isn't it, Emmanuel?
Yeah, like you said, I think when he was at when he was at the AC Pisa, he got called up to the national team. I'm sure that's where he first played with Maradona, and maybe like having like the first experience. I think all Argentinian players want to play for the national team. The recent World Cup they won in 2022, you could see the passion from Buenos Aires, from the fans as well, and also having the opportunity to come to Seville was, I think, something he really wanted to, because after doing so well at the Copa America with Argentina, that's winning their first Copa America, I think that was 32 years, breaking the drought. So many clubs were kind of linked to Cholo, and he stayed another season and played for Pisa in the second division. But after that, he wanted to leave, and obviously coming to Seville. And I think the coach at Seville at that time was an Argentinian coach, and I'm also sure
it
was like a no-brainer. If you're an Argentina player, for example, let's take this current generation, and they are saying, even though Messi is kind of like towards the end of his career, but let's say you are among getting to the peak of your career, and they tell you, come and play, for example, let's just say, let me use Paul's club, Mallorca, and we are going to also be bringing Messi. The chances of you saying no is almost kind of impossible.
No, I think that's it. I think he was playing under the World Cup winning manager as well, the Argentine World Cup winning manager, if I remember rightly. So it kind of became a bit of a love-in at the Roman Sanchez Pizjuan. Obviously, he only stays in Sevilla for a short time, and he goes, as we've already said, home. And this is his first of two stints as a player with Atletico Madrid, and it's a fantastic stint for him. He really established himself as not just a world-class player in La Liga, Paul. He established himself as a world-class player in the world. We have the 1995-96 double with La Liga and the Copa del Rey triumph, obviously bringing trophies back to Atletico Madrid. It kind of like set him up on this trajectory, didn't it? Where eventually he would follow many other players who, it's sometimes hard to imagine that, the pull of Serie A in Italy at the time to take a player away from Atletico Madrid who's just won the league and the Copa del Rey to then go to Internazionale and to Inter Milan. Kind of boggles the mind now, but it was quite normal back then. But what he did in his first stint at Atleti was incredible, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, part of the 4-4-2 they seemed to favour during that period when they won that double. I think we've spoke about this before as well when we've covered some other players. I don't know if it was when we spoke about. It was an early episode, actually. To be fair, I feel like
I think it was Valencia, wasn't it? Yeah,
it was. Yeah, and we've spoken about the pulling power that Italian football had as well in the 90s. I mean, obviously we could probably list 5 to 10 English players that went over there because obviously they went for big money, and it was players like Paul Gascoigne, etc. But there was also, as we spoke about, I think you're right. I think it was the Valencia episode. The number of players that left La Liga to go to Italy, because Italy was at a time where Football Italia was on the telly, and the television money, well, the money in general was flowing around. There was the lifestyle. It had I think what the young people say, it had a vibe about it that you wanted to be a part of. And I think as well, like, it probably wasn't much of a motivation, but whenever we see kits from Italian teams from that period, I think they all look very, very stylish.
It's Italian for you.
Well, it is, yeah. Goes without saying it. I mean, the last Euros that Italy were at, 2021, 2020. Remember, even the managers and the coaching staff looked so cool in those grey suits that they all had, like Mancini and that. So yeah, it just goes with Italian culture, doesn't it? Style. Anyway, back to Simeone. I think it's probably fair to say that from the first stint at the club, he seemed to get what it was about. And that's something that carries on with him in his second stint, and then obviously his coaching career. He seemed to understand what it meant to be Atleti, and he's a natural leader as well. You could see that in the way that he used to play. He'd command the midfield, and he was always. I remember watching football at the time, and obviously a lot of people will, if they think back to 98, and obviously he's the guy who lets his foot trail up in the air. But if you put that bit to one side and think about how he was as a player when the ball was actually in play, he was constantly talking to his teammates and directed. He was a leader on the pitch as much as he's become one off the pitch as well, and a fantastic player himself, let alone a talker.
Yeah, I think when he comes back to Atleti for his second stint in 2003, if I remember rightly, he's kind of been there and done it now, hasn't he? He's won the UEFA Cup with Inter Milan. He's won the Scudetto with Lazio under Sven-Göran Eriksson, God rest him. And he comes back into Atleti as a veteran player, Emmanuel, as an experienced player, but he's joining Atleti at a bit of a low ebb, a bit of a low time. They're just coming back from that relegation. They're sort of like sussing out their team. They're kind of like looking to introduce a few fresher faces. This is the time when sort of Fernando Torres is starting to emerge as a player, and we kind of see him become a mentor for those kind of players, for Torres, for Gabi, and you kind of maybe sort of bit of a preview of what he would be like as a manager during this second stint with Atleti, didn't you?
Yeah, and if I may, I just go back to his first stint. At Sevilla, I think after the second season, and Real Madrid wanted him. And he also wanted to go there. But then again, I think the new manager at Real Madrid, I think that was 94, if I'm not mistaken, went for Fernando Redondo instead of Cholo. So that's when he ended up coming to us. And I'm sure Cholo, knowing who he is coming to Atleti, he obviously comes with a bitter taste, because I think you cannot blame him at the time. At that time, Real Madrid are one of the biggest clubs in the world. And if they are interested in you, it's like a no-brainer to want to go there. And I'm sure when he comes to us, has that hunger to want to, like, okay, you guys opted for someone else other than me. So I'm kind of going to like prove you guys why you guys should have bought me and those stuff. So I think from the get-go, it's like a perfect marriage for Aleti, because you have somebody who wants to prove something, and also coming to Aleti, and also with the El Pupas mentality we used to have, we no longer have, and embodying the fans was like beautiful. And now he talked about his second stint, and when he came like a, let's say, like an experienced person, because I think that was like his second time where he was coaching under Luis Aragonés. The first time was at Sevilla in his second season.
Yeah.
So Aragonés bringing him in was kind of like good for the young players at that time, especially Torres, because Simeone, if you look at some of the matches, because to be honest, to prepare for this podcast, I had to like go back and watch some of the matches, and you see the way he's on the pitch. He's a fighter. It's true he has the side Paul doesn't want to talk about, which Liverpool fans kind of reminded him a couple of weeks ago. But I think that is Simeone. And but the good thing was that him coming back to Atleti at that period, I think that side of him was no longer there. The side where, for example, got him punched in the face, I think by Romario. Also at a Barca player, I think having like I think like a Superman kick on his thigh. So him coming back, I think, like you said, he has won everything. He went to Lazio, and I think one of the reasons why I think Cholo actually like bonded with Aleti is if you look at his career, the first time he's called for Argentina, they kind of break a drought by not winning the Coppa Italia. He goes to Inter, they win the Scudetto, I think, on the last day. I think that's after a number of years. He goes to Lazio, they also win the Scudetto. So he comes to Aleti. So if you notice, wherever he went to, it's like he was breaking barriers. So coming, I think, at Aleti, where it's kind of like difficult to win a lot, and then Aragonés bringing him back in that second stint, even though there were certain moments, I think, through that second stint where he did not play much. But I think if you watch the videos, you see him on the touchline, he's animating, he's talking to players as if he's already the coach. I think from there, you could already see, like, even if this guy retired, then he will obviously take in a career in coaching, because I believe the second stint in Aleti was very, very important, in my opinion, for Cholo's coaching career, because he mentioned Aragonés is like the best coach he has ever been under, even though he did not win like anything under him. So it kind of like shows why that second spell at Aleti was very important for him.
Yeah,
I
with
think sorry to interrupt there. I think I've seen since there's been a few times where you're right, Emmanuel, that Cholo has referenced Aragonés as being somebody who he feels like he's always tried to carry on a style in the way that he sets up his athletic teams now. Obviously, it's become its own brand, but he said that he's always wanted to try and carry on the work that Aragonés started. And even though, like you say, he didn't win anything whilst with him at Atleti, he's always sort of felt this connection and appreciation for the type of coach that Aragonés was, and clearly he sees himself as a disciple of him in a way, I'd say.
Yeah.
No, I think I 100% agree on that as well. And, you see this, so many way we talk about disciples is probably the exact right word, Paul. We see them for Aragonés, we see them for Bielsa, we see them for, so many other managers as well. And it's interesting to see how Simeone has managed to sort of like ride against the tide a little bit. Everyone wants to be sort of like a possession-based football manager who, basically trains athletes to become, goal scorers type thing. With Simeone, you can see that the tactics were always about sticking to those principles that he learned from his time as a player, from Aragonés, and he took them into management. And I'm not saying he immediately had success with his first few jobs in South America, but he took on some big jobs with the likes of Racing Club, San Lorenzo, River Plate, for example. But those are clubs still that you've got to be a decent manager to be employed by them. Even back in sort of Argentina, you've got to be a decent player manager to get those. But when he came back to Atleti as manager after having that success back in Argentina, it was instant success, wasn't it? And it was like a match made in heaven, Emmanuel. It was like they were screaming out for somebody to come in and basically transform the club to be this, much needed agitator to the Barcelona, Real Madrid monopoly that they've been operating for the last 10 years.
Well, Nick, I'll say first of all that Gilmarin took a gamble, and
Mm.
for him, I think the gamble paid off, and he's very, very lucky. His Atleti fans are not like the biggest fans of Gilmarin and the rest. And uh, actually, a friend of mine wrote a book called I think it's Made in Argentina, Master in Madrid, which talked about Simeone, and he talked about when Gil called Simeone, and Simeone had to come to Atleti, and he was kind of like not so sure. And his son Giuliano, who now plays for Atleti, was like, "Dad, you are going to be coaching Falcao. You are going to be playing against Messi. You are going to be playing against Ronaldo." And Simeone was kind of unsure at the time, but I think Giuliano kind of echoing those words in Simeone's ears, kind of like brought to the realization that this is like a dream come true and a job where he should actually take. And before I actually talk about like Simeone's coaching and also being successful at Atleti, I think the reason, in my opinion, why he referenced Aragonés a lot is because when Simeone came back in his second stint, Atleti just came back from the second division, and
Mm.
Aragonés is that type of a coach where his mentality is like out of this world. I can recall like watching like interviews, and also because also of players talking about the fact that when he went to the Spain national team and he did not call stars for Real Madrid, he bet on the younger generation like Fabregas, and you get the media when they don't win the game or when they even draw a
Mm.
game. You have the media talking about him. When is he going to call Raul to the national team? So Aragonés is like his mentality as a coach is also one of the top coaches there. I know many fans, like especially my generation, don't know that Aragonés was actually the one who started Spain's winning trophy and also dominance in the world. So
Yeah.
that actually is like a reference for Cholo. So when Cholo is coming to Atleti, I believe he comes to Atleti at the time where Atleti are struggling, because I'm just going to go a little bit off topic. I became an Atleti fan in April 2009 because I and my elder brother, we are watching La Liga, and he's telling me I should come see how Barca is going to beat this team they are playing. And Barca had Eto'o, Messi, and Henry. So I watched
Mm.
the game, because at that time I don't have his football club I'm supporting. I'm actually thinking of supporting Marseille because the fan base in Marseille is crazy, and Cameroon is French speaking and English speaking. So
Yeah.
I watched the match, and Atleti are 3-1 down, but the fans at the Calderon are singing. I'm like, gars, est-ce que tu vois les choses ici? Mais the supporters, the fans are going crazy, those type of stuff. And Atleti actually came back and won the game 4-3. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. Fast forward, like 1 year after, in the 2010 World Cup, Forlan is scoring goals with the Jabulani, and I'm like, okay. And I also was lucky enough to watch the Europa League final where Atleti also beat Fulham. So that kind of got me on board. So that's how I get to support Atleti. And then I came when the club had success with Kiko Sanchez. And then all of a sudden, this club is almost relegated. And my other brother is mocking me and all those stuff. And then Simeone came in. I'm like, okay, because at the moment, most of the matches is difficult to watch Atleti matches in Cameroon here. So you have to basically watch like highlights on YouTube. I think Cyber Cafe was still a big thing at the time. So that's how I was doing. So when he came in, I was like, guys, je sais pas, I don't know. Let's see what happens. And then he loses his first match. I think I'm like, oh God, what's happening here? But then I just said I will follow, and then gradually the results kept on turning, and everything was just going amazing. Won the Europa League again. I'm like, deux champions, on a gagné, little bit French, and I'm so happy. And then we haven't beaten Real Madrid like in like forever. And at this moment, I'm still trying to know the club while I'm also like studying. So the Copa del Rey final is played at the Bernabeu, and I think at that time you had Real Madrid fans in Spain putting up banners and saying they won like a new rival. We are not the rival, and this game against Real Madrid, in my opinion, actually kickstarts Cholismo because he went to the Bernabeu, he got them beaten in the Copa del Rey final, and you have the famous picture of Gabi planting the flag at the Bernabeu. So it's like a statement from Cholo. And while all this is happening, I'm lucky enough because that's the holiday, so I'm able to watch. And the next year, I think for the La Liga triumph, which I think we're going to get there, I was actually in boarding school, so I can't watch the game, and I'm to write the O levels, ordinary levels, that's the GCE. So we had like few days before, and the only way to watch is to watch in the staff house. So I'm at the window, left and right, and when Sanchez kind of scores the goal, I'm like, man, God, what is happening here, man? and then Godin scores. I'm kind of going crazy. And I think the passion I have for Atleti today is also cause of Cholo, because when you watch him, he's like a coach, right? But he's like a fan as well on the touchline. You see him kicking every ball, heading every ball, and that second stint, I think the start was not the best, but the fans actually love him, because if you look at when he left after his second spell as a player, the sending off was actually like amazing. So I believe winning the Copa del Rey in the Bernabeu and also winning La Liga at the Nou Camp or Camp Nou is actually what actually kickstarts Cholismo. It's like he says, I am here, and it's true, our backs are against the wall, and we are going to give you guys like making stuff for you guys. And from there, it's just been crazy.
Yeah, I think it's worth reminding people of what he inherited, and because it underlines really the impact. And you're right, I think it was, and we could talk for hours about the Atleti forward line during that period that you started watching, Aguero, Forlan, everyone. It was just, that's another episode in itself, really. We can, but I think, he comes in December 2011, Atleti 10th in La Liga. The run of results, it was Manzano was the coach he replaced, wasn't it, Manzano? So he comes in, and obviously they're shipping a lot of goals. And you're right, he says, we're here, we're going to make things tough for you, as in the big boys in the league. And he absolutely does that. By he sticks with what he believes, and to go back to what we've said about him as a player, it goes back to a system that he feels he trusts and can rely on. 4-4-2. He tightens things up defensively. He makes the team be difficult to break down, but it's not just like a tactical. It's not a Benitez style system where like everything is regimented, everything's a drill, it's more. It comes from passion, which is what you get from him on the sidelines. He makes the players understand mentally what their responsibilities are as a collective and as an individual, and he sets them up in a shape that brings everybody into a compact space, hard to break down. They stop conceding goals, with the exception of obviously his first game. But then they build that as a platform then to build and kick on. And obviously, as Emmanuel's just talked us through, the success came very quickly, actually. First half of his season, his first half season, and then his first full season in charge, silverware. It's crazy. But it's not just down to the tactics, it's down to the mentality that he brings, and he really does sort of, he corrals the group of players, and he gets them to buy into what his idea of how football should be played is, and the fans back him. The fans buy into it as well, because it's energetic, because it's passion. And I'm sure we will talk about it a bit more, but there's definitely I think at this period of time we're seeing like a new link between players on the pitch, manager on the sideline, and fans in the stand that we'd not seen for a long time. There's a deep connection during the games there that seems to, almost like it comes overnight, I think, with like, I don't know how he does it, because it didn't feel, and I've watched a few games back now, it doesn't feel like it starts to build up. It's kind of like, okay, Cholo's here, and all of a sudden the noise volume, the atmosphere and the noise inside the Calderon just seems to go to another level, and the players feed off that energy from the crowd.
Yeah, and we spoke with Chris Clements from the Estadios de España about the Calderon. It was one of the main stadiums we spoke about, and much has been said about them going to the Metropolitano. It's a great looking stadium. I'll hopefully be going there next Saturday for the game against Osasuna. But again, it maybe is one of these things where you've got just kind of like a meeting of the fates, really, where you've got that kind of atmosphere, which we said is famously like the closest you'll find to a South American football stadium type atmosphere in the Calderon. You've got that passionate, energetic, like you say, he's with you for every header, he's with you for every tackle kind of manager, and then those fans as well. And the really big turning point for me, sort of like the litmus paper that showed us Atleti are here as a force. They're not just here to, make a final or win a Copa del Rey or things like that. They're here as a force. Is that season when they win the league in 2014 and it breaks that dominance and they become a rival for Real Madrid and Barcelona? And to be honest, I think you're right, Emmanuel. They needed that. Both of those clubs needed another rival to make La Liga interesting to that wider audience, for reasons why we watch La Liga, for why yourselves watch La Liga and other people around the world. But Simeone did that. And I feel like it was only Simeone who could do that, because previously to that, we hadn't had a different winner of La Liga since I think it was Valencia in 2004 with Rafa Benitez. That's 10 years, a decade of that duopoly just basically taking the piss. Let's call a spade a spade. He stopped that from happening. He has subsequently changed the game in Spain for the better that way, hasn't he?
Yeah, and like you said, La Liga needed it, like a big club. And though we can discuss whether Atleti is at the level of Barca and Madrid, will be a topic for another day. But he came in, like Paul said, and he made Atleti to be rigid. He made them to be able to compete. It's like what they say going back to basis. But like Paul said, it was not just about the rigidity in it being true. They had flexibility there. Because in that same Atleti team that won the title, you have players like Felipe Luis. It's true, he's one of the best left back, in my opinion, of all time, because he's balanced going forward and also defending. But you had players like Ada Turan, who are the creative sparks. You had players like Koke just coming from the academy, who at that moment he was more renowned for what he could do with the ball and more than what he could do without it. So I think Cholo coming and meeting that team he saw there, and also the additions, the type of players he brought in, the likes of Miranda, who could actually bleed for Atleti. So Paul talked about the mentality, and I think that's something also Aragonese. Fabregas was talking to, I think, Garalinica on an interview where he was mentioning how Aragonese used to like prepare them before the game mentally. So Cholo kind of tapped into that. And I think a lot of people, especially the modern generation, especially those fans of Atleti who came after when the club is successful now, don't actually understand what Cholo represents, because before Cholo came, the team were kind of in a mess. Majority of the fans are not happy with the takeover from the Gil family of Atleti, and they're still carrying that grudge. So you kind of have like the team, the fans, and the board. Those three are kind of separated. But in steps Cholo, he unites all of them. And in his recent seasons, he has been talking about the fact that all those three pillars, which is four, that's the coaching staff, the players, the board, and the fans, they need to be one. So that kind of tells you like the figure Cholo is, because he is able to unite Atleti. So he kind of makes the fans, it's true, silverware obviously helps to forget about the fact that they are not happy with the way the Gil family came to have Atletico Madrid. So tactics aside, I believe Cholo's success came from the fact that he could succeed off the pitch. He could have everyone on board in such a way that even in seasons where I, for one, wanted, for example, the team to be more expansive, but we still stuck to like the defensive and counter-attacking football, I could not say anything because I was happy with that, because he saw us a dream and we bought that dream, and it was like he's the leader. And I think that's a quality you don't see in this modern era of coaches, which is like you don't see at all. And him doing that, obviously, the trophies have actually spoken for themselves, and he's been able to win like La Liga with twice. And like you said, I think another reason why, even though I'm not happy saying this because it means I'll be praising Gil Marin, but the club actually learned from the mistakes of the like of Real Zaragoza and Valencia. And it's true that we have won La Liga. We want to stay there, but we have to go this like in an eco-friendly way, not like in a rush. So they kind of took it slowly, and the club has grown to what we now know and the influence the club now has in the league and also in the world of football.
I definitely say there's a point.
Yeah, I think there's a few things in there I think that are really worth picking at. So obviously I want to just mention it as well, that first title win in 2013, 2014, and it's great that it comes from it's at the Camp Nou, and the Barcelona fans are even like, they're quite happy for you when the full-time whistle goes, really, aren't they? Because obviously the wider implications. And I think it's absolutely right. I think La Liga needed it. I think the other two clubs needed that shake-up. It caused them to raise the game. And we could probably say that maybe at the time, like, it felt like almost as if people assumed that Atleti only had like one style of football, but that's not true.
Yeah.
And I think, Manuel, you and I don't know if anybody listening will know this, but you and I have had several conversations on your podcast. I remember when Atleti played City in the Champions League in, was it 2021, 22?
Yeah, the return
And we
leg.
spoke then, yeah. And we spoke about the style of play there and how it's evolved over time under Cholo. It's not just it's not quite the same. Yes, a lot of people will say that it's still got that defensive rigidity, but like it's also, he has tried to innovate in a way, and he has tried to evolve it. And I think as well, like, to go back to maybe the second title win is probably a good thing to point to. He wins it in a very different way compared to the first. That style of football where it was Luis Suarez that season was absolutely incredible. And in fact, there's so many things within that season we could talk about. Diego Costa going in January and everything, everything. Like, there's so much to it. We would be here all day. But but like, he, the two title wins, I think, are very different, but people always sort of talk of it as if it's the same type of Atleti design, and I think that's quite unfair criticism that Cholo gets. I think people, and maybe it will come after he leaves, that people will learn to appreciate him for what he's done over time with Atleti, and it's almost like every time that somebody says, they've been playing the Simeone way for too long now, and they have a season where maybe they'll finish fourth rather than third or something like that. They'll always be like, right, he's under pressure, he's going this summer, and then the next year, they'll have an incredible season. And then obviously, we can talk about the last. I mean, we're more of a nostalgia podcast, but if we talk about, like, last season and the start of this season, the players that he's brought in, he has tried to bring in a different style. And it's not quite had the desired results. But then there's people saying, "Oh, well, maybe it's the time that he calls it quits." But I think he'll just prove them wrong again, because that's what he does. He proves people wrong. He's anyway. Sorry, I've gone off on so many different tangents there that I've completely derailed the agenda.
No, you know what? But I think you're absolutely right, Paul. People do seem to typecast, Cholo in a certain way, and there's those conversations happening at the moment, aren't there, Emmanuel, around Simeone's future. Obviously, you've already mentioned Philip Luis as a footballer. He's now being courted as a potential successor with the success he's having with Flamengo, I think it is, in Brazil. But Paul is right. There were a few doubts at the start after the first few games this season. He's now got a fully fit squad to work from. He's getting results. The football, beating Real Madrid the other weekend 5-2. That was on nobody's bingo cards, was it? It shows he's still got that element of surprise in him.
Yeah, I think apologies to Atleti fans that I think I was supposed to start the podcast with high five. Yeah, and well, jokes aside, like you said, I think one of the reasons why I started the podcast, Partido, obviously coming from like Cholo's phrase of, because when I was watching, like, following the highlights or his press conferences back in 2014, like in cyber cafes, he said Partido, like minute by minute, game by game, training by training. I was like, God, we are about to win the league, and this guy keeps on staying humble. Why? Because like us Cameroonians, we are like kind of far all this stuff. So now I think he's, like you said, he's like unfairly judged, and it hurts me a lot because I believe, in my opinion, because I follow him so closely, Cholo, he's a coach where, in my opinion, with the ball, he's one of the innovators of the game, like the way the team play the football. But now without the ball, he is always conservative, where he wants to defend like deep. And as Paul mentioned in the 20, I think that's the title in 2021 where we had Luis Suarez, the team did not actually defend in a mid block, in a low block. Sorry, the team actually defended in a mid block where we are talking about at the halfway line, and obviously choosing moments to press and win the ball. And I'm sure majority of those who actually like do that are like guys who have lazy analysis. It's like the Celta Vigo game where I let it draw this weekend, and I've forgotten his name, but I don't actually like call people out here. But I was so annoyed with his like he's doing commentary. He does like the podcast with Silo, and he kept saying that we scored, Alessi scored, and Alessi just went and sat back. I'm like, if you watch the game, Alessi are playing away from home, and they have played like 2 games, winning 5 goals, and they are playing at Balaidos, not easy, and the players are kind of like fatigued. And also, Atleti are not defensive because they wanted to. Celta are one of the best ball playing teams in La Liga at the moment, so Celta is kind of like forcing them. But Atleti actually presses high, and it's like me watching the game and arguing with the commentator who is not even listening, and I'm like, we have pressed and won the ball and almost scored. You don't say anything, but when we defend deep and we are so. I like Paul said, I think a lot of people don't actually recognize Cholo. And Paul, if you recall with me that season where Atleti actually were knocked out by City, after the 2020-22 World Cup, Atleti were one of the best teams in the world to watch. Atleti scored like the highest amount of goals within that period as after the World Cup. And a lot of people will not actually focus on that. They will just focus on like Cholo likes to defend it. But I think there's a lot of evolution of football tactically, which my podcast is based on. But it's not, Cholo is somebody who wants to control the game. And he believes that there is more than one way to control games. It's not all about playing like Pep Guardiola, high pressing and the rest. And it hurts me, to be honest, when I see especially the English media like portray Cholo as this guy who just loves to defend for 90 minutes. And coming back to this season, I believe he's actually changed. The team are pressing high, the second highest line in La Liga. And also, a lot of, it's true, football is a result-based sport, but if you look at the performances, Atleti are one of the best teams, and I think they perform better than Real Madrid this season. But Real Madrid have the results because they have the world-class players, and Atleti have actually like had like unfortunate results this season, like mistakes that led to goal or match the one, Barrios giving the ball away, Llorente's free kick, Solot's penalty, red card, Clement. So the errors are just there. But if you look at how the team plays, I believe they are like one of the teams where you enjoy to watch. I mean, they put 5 past Madrid. It's not easy. It's not easy.
But that's the thing, though, is like that result comes at a time where Simeone is under pressure. Everybody's written Atleti off. Everybody's saying, "Oh, he's not." But then they pull that. They pull that performance together and get that result. And he's done that so many times over the last, 10, 15 years that he's been there, that whenever somebody doubts him, he seems to throw it back in the face in superb, fashion. And to go back to you're absolutely right that and I do remember that Champions League game, obviously with City, and I'm going to refer to that one because the English media before that game it's like they hadn't really ever watched Atleti. They had just read about Atleti. They were very much saying, it's Simeone, play defensive, they'll get a lot of yellow cards, and they'll try and win 1-0, and that'll be it. And they were almost like, it's kind of like, sometimes when you read a very poor quality summary of a Getafe match report, like they were putting, it was almost like if you read it, you'd think like they were describing Simeone's team as a borderless team, And unfortunately, because of like the fact that we now have like a period of time where I would say that there's some really, really good football journalists, but there's also some that are perhaps overstretched or overworked, that they kind of phone it in and they don't take the time to really appreciate and look at it. And they fall into this trap of stereotyping a Simeone team as being this same one that's always been, and that's just so unfair in terms of how they've evolved, or Atleti have evolved, and that Simeone, if you look, even like more recently, like look at Rodrigo de Paul, okay, signing that has, he's a character as well. But he was someone that everybody has said, like, at various periods of times, he's fantastic. He's a perfect Simeone player. Oh no, he's terrible. He's and it's either or. There's two extremes, and it's like there's never any nuance with it. And you mentioned Guardiola's style of play. Last time that Guardiola and Simeone faced each other, obviously, was that Champions League knockout. Was it quarterfinals? I think it was, or round of 16. Can't remember now.
Quarterfinals.
Quarterfinals, yeah. All the media were saying, like, how are you going to face up against a Simeone side? Your teams have the ball at 70% possession. Simeone's just going to try and play on the counter attack. And Guardiola was quite straightforward. He said it's not how they work. Their intensity, the tenacity, the way they press, how high up the pitch they play, it's not how you're describing. Guardiola, to be fair, he said, there's a lot of people who don't recognize the type of football that Simeone plays. And to go back to what we were saying earlier on, he is clearly a disciple from Luis Aragonés, and you can see that he does have a plan that might not always be to somebody's taste, but he gets results usually when people least expect it. And go on.
I was going to say the big thing from me for him in this modern era is one of the only few managers that has actually got a plan B.
Yeah,
you see training ground managers nowadays basically repeat themselves, play out from the back, even though it's not working, for example, and they just need to go along. Simeone is not afraid to change it up mid-game, and there is a complete lack of high-quality managers that do that nowadays, and basically try to stick to their guns and play that way. And I think a big part of it as well, Paul, for Simeone, the reason why he's cast as this sort of pantomime villain is I think it's down to two things. One, that 1998 World Cup, the English media just have not let that go. And secondly, because he dresses in all black and things like that, he looks like a bub, but he's not. He's so much more cultured than that, and he's so much more experienced than that. And frankly, you do not become a manager in Spanish football for over a decade if you do not have that nous about you as well. And ultimately, that is the big sort of like applause for Simeone. He's managed to get longevity where other world-class managers, talking Jose Mourinho, etc., haven't even managed to last more than 2-3 years in Spain. He has been there for nearly 15 years.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's the fire that he brings with it that just makes it great. It's like we say, it's not just tactics. There's something special. I'm conscious, obviously, that how many tangents I've gone on, so I feel like we should allow you two to talk for a bit more, especially Emmanuel as the guest.
Well, to be fair, I think we've covered a lot of ground here, Emmanuel, and I think maybe the one last thing I would like to ask you is sort of, as an Atleti fan, just to sort of like put your heart out there, this relationship that you have with Diego Simeone, you cannot buy it in football. People don't have these relationships with managers anymore. It is something that is totally unique in especially in Spanish football, as we've said. But it's got to end. That's kind of maybe the part that I'm going to kind of like the plaster I'm going to pull. There's going to be an end one day. I hope it's not soon, but if there is, will Atleti be able to survive without Simeone? Will they continue to be this, challenger to the top two? Will they, continue to be the club that they are, they've built themselves up to now? Or I'm not saying you'll know the answers, but there's got to be a contingency plan here, surely.
Well, first of all, to talk about like the relationship, like where I think most Atleti fans have with Cholo, which, like you said, is a rarity in today's football. It's actually something special because it's not like I'm calling out like the African fans here, but most of African fans who support like European clubs, okay, they actually do that because it's like winning. And I've gotten that like throughout me going through secondary school, high school, and even university. You're supporting Atletico Madrid, and where have the English clubs and Barca and Madrid gone to? So it's like how can I say, I don't really have the words for it, but it's just like he transmits that same energy. It's like if I'm at home now and I'm watching a game, my siblings, they are like, yeah, let's see Simeone in action, all this stuff, because you want to live the game like he lives it. He's like Paul said, he transmits a certain energy to the fans that is like, you can't explain it. Because I think the highest thing I believe Atleti fans relate with Cholo is because we know that before a coach, before he is the manager of the club, he is a fan. So he lives the game. He suffers like we do. And lucky for us, he's the type of manager who expresses it, not like say Alex, where they just sit. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but he shows it on the touchline, which is good for us. And coming back to him leaving, I would say I've always like not been a fan of Cholo out because I want him to stay as long as he can. And that's because when I started learning the game tactically, I started saying things I'm not saying. Like, you don't win football game just by playing high intensity football like Paco Gemes does when he was at Rayo. No, you win games by actually, there are games where you suffer. There are games where you, and that's actually sees the game where you have to control those games. And the reason why a lot of Atleti fans don't want Cholo to go is because of the board. Atleti, despite the fact that Gilmarin and Cerezo have actually done like a good job in getting the club financially healthy and stable, the fans don't actually see them as like some people who can run the club well. I'm saying so because despite all the criticism Cholo gets, majority of the signings should not be signings who are playing for a club like Atleti, who are competing for what Atleti is competing. I'm sure you agree with me. Atleti has played 3 seasons with centre backs who will not even start for Europa League clubs.
Yeah.
And Cholo has to kind of like work the magic. Atleti needs a centre back this season. The club doesn't want to buy a centre back, so that's the fear. But I think in recent like weeks, you have had like rumors coming out about Apollo, a group from America taking over the club, and I think the recent things they have been doing, like appointment for the board, has actually surprised Atleti fans themselves. For example, we have Oscar Mayo, who used to work for La Liga and he's like the chief coordinator, and he has helped the club brought in a lot of sponsorship deals. And you have Carlos Bucero, who actually did fantastic this summer, apart from towards the end of the transfer window. And now they just brought in Alemani. So I think those are signs that the club is working towards a good direction. And I believe Cholo himself might be living at the 2027, where the final might be played in the final is at the Metropolitano. And if you look at a lot of key players in the squad, their contracts are ending at 2027. Even Cholo himself, his contract ends at 2027. And Apollo are basically coming in and they are gradually like taking over. And I believe that may be when Cholo leaves, which will be disheartening for me because I believe when Cholo leaves, Koke will also leave because Koke made his debut when I was also a fan. So it will be so bad for me. But I believe the club now, this point in time, is actually better well run than how it was. And that's thanks to maybe Cholo actually working his magic and also like changes at the board, which I mentioned. So a lot of fans will actually be happy with Cholo leaving now than say Cholo leaving last season or 2 or 3 years ago, because we have seen what Gilmarin and Cerezo did at the club before Cholo came in, and we have seen what happened to Arsenal and what happened to United. And when you don't have owners who are as good at running clubs, like for example Man City, Liverpool, what happens when the guy who is like the linchpin holding everything together leaves? Everything crumbles, and that's the fear with all Atleti fans, I would say.
No, and I think, like say, we spoke with Guillaume about that in terms of Unai Emery following Arsene Wenger. We saw it about David Moyes and Alex Ferguson, and we'll have the same with Diego Simeone as well. Someone will have the larger shoes to fill when he does eventually depart. And there are a few names that are floating out there at the moment, like Felipe Luis, and there's Fernando Torres, obviously in charge of Atletico Madrileño. So there will be a day, but let's not hope it's anytime soon. I'm going to have to say thank you so much, Emmanuel, for joining us. Merci de vous joindre à nous ce soir is what I'm going to go for from my GCSE French, if I've managed to get that right. we did do a French 11 as well, where I practiced some French too. So I think I'm starting to show off a little bit, Paul, aren't I?
Well, your French is much better than mine, So, yeah, I think you're growing in confidence, aren't you? That's what it is.
Yes, exactly. And we need much more, more brilliant guests like Emmanuel to help us, practice our lingo and to get out of our comfort zones as well. But thank you, Emmanuel, for joining us. Where can we find you day to day? We've obviously already mentioned Partido podcast, which is such an excellent listen as well. I used to do the Giricast, which was a Malaga Club de Football podcast in English. What you guys do with Atleti is incredible in terms of learning about a club as well on their week to week. It is really fantastic. Anywhere else we can find you?
Well, before I actually say that, I think the guy who filled in for Paul last week, I think he was part of the Guricast, and I can recall you guys used to like mail me, and yeah, it's kind of like as deja vu, like kind of wow, speaking to you guys in person. I'm not really a social media person, as maybe from what I've said about like the future of football on Atleti and also this nostalgia podcast. I'm sure you obviously noticed that I'm not really the TikTok guy or whatever, but I think I just use only Twitter. And a lot of people are like, yeah, you have to maybe use other social medias and the rest, but you can find me at La Liga Lavo or at the Papot on Twitter.
Perfect. I think you need to get on television personally, Emmanuel. You are an infectious and brilliant person who, more importantly, knows his stuff as well. I'm we've had some fantastic guests on here, and you are up there with the most knowledgeable about their club as well. So thank you very much for your time. Paul, thank you so much for joining me once again. I'm sure we'll be back again next week to talk about some more nostalgic football. I think we've got a magic episode next week planned, haven't we?
We certainly have. And I'm very much looking forward to it. And I'd just like to say as well, thank you, Emmanuel. It's always a pleasure to speak to you. And this one, it's different because obviously today we've been talking about things that happened in the past rather than things that are happening now. So I would recommend anybody give Partido podcast a listen and follow Emmanuel on Twitter. I've really enjoyed it. As Nick says, I'll see everybody next week.
Thank you so much, everybody listening at home. Gracias as always, and we'll see you again next time. Hasta luego.